Good evening, everyone. I now declare the Policy Review Committee meeting open at 6:15 p.m. As presiding member, I confirm that the City of Wanneroo Standing Orders Local Law 2021 will apply to the proceedings of this meeting. Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Whadjuk people. We would like to pay respect to the elders of the Noongar Nation, past, present and future, who have walked and cared for the land, and we acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contributions made to the life of this city and this region. Please note that the audio-visual proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online, with the exception of matters discussed behind closed doors. The broadcast of the proceedings of the meeting can be accessed live and on demand through the City of Wanneroo YouTube channel. Item 1, attendances, as per the record. Tonight we have received a request for electronic attendance from Councillor Bedworth. The Mayor has approved this request. I will now ask my fellow... we will now ask Councillor Bedworth to join the meeting. Yep, great, fabulous. Councillor Bedworth, will you now be able to make your declaration prior to participating in today's meeting online?
I'm assuming that's a confidentiality declaration.
Yes, Councillor Bedworth.
I declare I can maintain confidentiality should this meeting go to closed session.
Thanks for confirming, Councillor Bedworth. Item 2, apologies and leave of absence. So we have Councillor Moore, who's currently on parental leave. Deputy Mayor Miles is an apology for this evening's meeting, and Councillor Smith is also an apology for this evening's meeting, and everyone else is here. Item 3, public questions and statement time. We have nobody in the gallery, so I won't read that out. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. So item 4.1, that the minutes of the Policy Review Committee meeting held on the 16th of February 2026 be confirmed. Could I have a mover and seconder for that? I've got Councillor Rowe moving and Councillor Figg is seconding, and we will go to the vote on that. That is confirmed unanimously. Item 5, reports. So declarations of interest by committee members, including the nature and extent of the interest, are to be made at the commencement of the item to which the interest relates. Declarations of interest forms are to be completed and handed to the Chief Executive Officer. So just for tonight's meeting, because we do have quite a few agenda items, there should be a sheet on the tables. I'll go around the room, and if there is anything that councillors would like to pull out, please let me know. So Councillor Seif, I'll start with you if you're okay. Is there any items that you wish to speak to, move an amendment or alternate, or ask any questions on?
5.3.
5.3. Yep. Any other? No. Councillor Fick.
None at the moment.
No problems. Thank you, Councillor Figg. Councillor Berry.
None for me, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mayor. Thank you. And Councillor Rowe.
Definitely 5.4 to pull out, thank you.
5.4, no problems. And just going through the amendments that we have, so 5.9 has already been indicated, 5.11 and 5.10 due to an amendment or alternate. All right, so if councillors are happy, we will do an en bloc for the... Oh, sorry, Councillor Bedworth, did you have any items that you wish to pull out or speak to?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedworth. So now that we've had the committees Sorry, I've gone blank for a minute. So we'll go through on block now. So for this will be item 5.1, item 5.2, item 5.5, item 5.6, item 5.7, item 5.8, and item 5.12, and item 7.1. Is the committee happy with that? No indication, so that will be moved on block. So could I ask for a mover and a seconder? So Mayor is moving and Councillor Seif is seconding. So we'll go to the vote on that for those items. So that is carried unanimously. So now we will go to item 5.3, the design review panel, which starts on page 42. Is there any questions from the committee? Councillor Seif.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on page 52. And under referral to design review panel, 1.1A, we're changing development of more than 2 multiple dwellings to 6. I just wanted an explanation for that, and because with my limited knowledge, 6 seems high, and I'm wondering why we didn't progress to just 4.
Mr. Divakis.
Through you, Chair. So we did a review of our development applications on multiple dwellings, and from memory we had no development applications for less than 6 multiple dwellings in the last 2 years or 24 months. So we didn't think that it was relevant to include it as a threshold in the policy. Notwithstanding, we can still request that development of that kind be referred if we feel that it would benefit from the review of the design review panel.
Councillor Seif.
Thank you very much. So we didn't have any applications more than 6, which is why we made the threshold 6. And what are the risks to the city? What are the risks of not going to the design review panel?
Mr. Divakis.
Through you, Chair. The risks are very low, namely because the development still has a development application assessment, it's still reviewed against the relevant standards, and the proposal is still reviewed at a development application stage to determine if it would benefit from the design review panel. So it's not a foregone conclusion that it won't be referred. So if we receive an application, let's say for 3 multiple dwellings, and administration feels that it would benefit from a review by design review panel, it has the option to still send it to a full design review panel meeting, or even to send it to just one member so that it's reviewed as part of that process. So the risk to the city is really more about a design outcome rather than a material risk to the city. And there are plenty of opportunities to send that development to the DRP if we felt it needed it.
Councillor Seif.
So if, two-part question, does the city charge any fees should it go to a design review panel, and would it be significant costs if we were to change that to 4 instead of 6? Would we then, would it have a significant cost to the city if we then needed to visit anything more than 4?
Mr. Divakis.
Yes, through you, Chair. The fees associated with the design review panel for the first meeting are absorbed by the city. The fees for the design review panel are set out in the terms of reference. Effectively, because we received so few applications, none in the last 24 months, I guess the risk to the city in terms of financial impact are almost none. But in terms of us referring to the design review panel, we have a budget set out as part of the council budget for design review panel, and so that is tracked and monitored as part of us sending it to design review. Any secondary follow-up application to the design review panel from an initial review is at the applicant's cost.
Councillor Seif, any further questions? Any other questions from the committee? No, I did have one that I had tabled. It was just in regards to the design review panel terms of reference and whether that could be embedded into the or at the back of the policy as an attachment, noting that we approved the terms of reference some time ago and it hasn't returned to council since. I'm not sure whether this would be the way to do it, noting that I think you did reference before that some of the fees are in the terms of reference and council was in charge of setting the fees and charges for the local government. So is that something that administration has considered?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for the question through you. So the terms of reference has never officially been adopted by council. It was attached to the original design review panel policy in 2018 when it was presented to council for note. It hasn't gone through any extensive changes by administration. One minor update, I think it was in 2021. The fees and charges associated with the design review panel are adopted through two methods. One is the fees and charges schedule that's adopted by council, and two is through the budget, effectively. So in relation to what council is responsible for, those two processes cover that. And then the terms of reference isn't a policy position, so isn't required for a formal endorsement by council.
Thank you for that. And no further questions. So the recommendation is on page 45. Could I seek a mover and seconder for this item? Councillor Figg is moving and Councillor Seif is seconding, so we'll go to the vote on that. Just waiting for the results. That looks like it has been carried unanimously. So we'll now move to item 5.4, which starts on page 64. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Rowe.
Just a couple of questions, Chair, and through yourself, I'd asked these when this matter last came before us. Just to give administration an opportunity again, what conversations do we have with developers when there is the intent to develop particularly playground and other park facilities that fall within their remit? Do we remind them of the existing sort of standards and expectation of provision? And the reason for the question, Chair, is that when a developer delivers an asset well above standard and other areas don't have developers to be able to make those contributions, it is creating and exacerbating a feeling of inequity in the city. So what conversations do we have with developers to remind them of our standards of expectation?
Mr Wansborough.
Through you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. Administration has a lot of conversations with various developers and their consultants in the, I guess, the development of new public open space. We certainly encourage early discussions and we will work through their concept designs to ensure that they comply with LPP 4.3, particularly the requirements in Schedule 2, so the required elements within a POS, and we'll also have a conversation with them around the optional components that they may wish to add as well. So we certainly ensure that they comply with the requirements.
Yes, Councillor Rowe.
Further question, Chair, and I think in an organisation this large, we always run the risk of having silos emerge or there not being a great deal of alignment between our policies. So with a policy like this being LPP 4.3, public open space, what level of interaction did it have with our active reserves master plan formally? And now that that document's somewhat defunct, we're moving towards community facilities framework and we're moving towards infrastructure plan. So what level of dialogue is there between either the plans or the service units? Because one is obviously talking about the standard provision of facilities in public open space, and something like community facilities framework and infrastructure plans are talking about how we would install retrospectively a lot of that equipment in neighbourhood and district parks across the city. So how are we making sure that there's conversations occurring between both those policies and those service units?
Mr. Warnsborough.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. Look, to the best of my knowledge, my understanding is those discussions would take place as part of the POS master planning for a particular area. So that POS master plan would have to take into consideration, I guess, those aspects of the community's facilities framework. And yeah, I believe that's part of the consultation process. There is good internal, I guess, discussion between service units to work through those issues. So there should be a strong alignment between them.
Councillor Rowe.
Chair, the rest are statements, so can I make them when I move or second the item?
Absolutely. Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Figg.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at page 90, the track changed document. So it's 5.2.4 about the variety of public open space that will be provided within a specified area. And I'm just wondering how the city or administration goes about, I guess, guiding or enforcing that balance of sizes and types of public open space within new developments.
Mr. Warnsborough.
Through Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. My understanding is that the balance is really struck through that public open space master planning process. That would look at a precinct, it would look at the distribution of different park hierarchies and how the different, I guess, facilities or amenity in each of those parks is delivered across a broader area. So the POS master plan is one of the key guiding documents in that regard.
Councillor Figg.
Thank you for that answer. And I guess a related follow-up is, you know, we have heard from other councillors in other forums about the commonality of the pocket parks and smaller parks. And I guess this is more of a practical question. Does administration see a trend away from those tiny parks, or are we still expecting to see those proliferate as new subdivisions come online in accordance with how this policy operates?
Mr. Warnsborough.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. Regarding pocket parks, look, we certainly encourage a mix of public open space types through the urban form. Pocket parks, we're not seeing a shift away from them, but we still see a nice mix of the different park hierarchies. The pocket parks play an important part of the urban fabric in that they're quite useful for, I guess, the immediate catchment and those users that live nearby. They also play an important part of potentially retaining vegetation, and they provide certainly amenity for the immediate area. They're good for community meeting places, and they can be used to retain, I guess, key landmarks or cultural features, and also potentially to retain significant trees in the landscape as well.
Any further questions, Councillor Figg? None indicated. Any further questions from the committee? I did have one, just in regards to, for the administration. So we had a workshop on this policy last year through Policy Review Committee. I'm just curious to understand, looking at the tracked changes, what changes were actually implemented from that workshop. So I know councillors brought up a variety of comments ranging from pocket parks to irrigation to everything like that. And looking at attachment 2, there's probably been a couple of changes to the irrigated turf in POS, but what other recommendations from that workshop were actually carried through in this policy review?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quite a few changes were added out of that workshop, and I can run through some of those key changes. Some of the new additions in the public open space relate to smart technologies. So there's new clauses that allow for smart infrastructure in our public open space, so smart irrigation systems, CCTV, environmental sensors, telecoms and so forth, which will improve safety, efficiency and community benefit, and it's assessed on a case-by-case basis. We've also included some provisions around fencing. So I think there was some concern raised about setbacks from busy roads and waterways. So we've added provisions which would allow fencing to be provided around playgrounds and provide some barrier or separation from those particular high-risk areas. We've also included provisions around fitness and playground equipment. So there's new guidance for locating and designing exercise or obstacle equipment. There's an emphasis on accessibility, durability, safety and local character. Playground designs must also be inclusive of all age groups and use sustainable, context-sensitive materials. So we certainly included those requirements as part of that review process. There was also some discussion around public toilets as well. So administration's still not supportive of toilets in small parks, but we have provided consideration of toilets for neighbourhood parks if there is a demonstrated need, if there's no nearby facilities and it's a high amenity location. So we've included some criteria around that. I just want to note that the costs of installing and maintaining public toilets is expensive. So we need to be very careful in terms of how we deploy those across the various sites. They are prone to vandalism, and they can be quite a high maintenance burden for the city. We've also included an optional items list in Schedule 2, which allows for flexible based design and can be tailored, I guess, to local needs and the site context. And there's also a stronger emphasis on sense of place, so including things like public art, local character and cultural interpretation in the park design itself. And finally, there's also new provisions to better protect and manage conservation areas. So in terms of conservation open space, it allows for high quality conservation land above the standard 2% to count towards POS requirements. It limits incompatible uses such as drainage, and it carefully controls the recreational access, and it also adds optional features like habitat supporting infrastructure such as nest boxes for wildlife, bee hotels and other similar things. So we certainly considered all of the points that came out of that workshop session. Okay.
Thanks for that, Mr. Warnborough. I think I may have an issue with my track change version of that, so I'll take that offline and check with council support. Is there any further questions? Councillor Figg?
Thank you, Chair. I do just have one more on page 93, just regarding 5.6.1 with the provision of sports public open space. I'm just looking at A, so it speaks of an area having already sufficient existing sport public open space within close proximity. And we're just wondering if there's a standard by which administration measures sufficient.
Mr. Warnsborough?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. I'm not aware of any standard or criteria by which we assess that against, but I think we'd probably look at the POS master plan in terms of what's nearby, and that would probably give some guidance as to what amenity is located in terms of sporting POS for an area.
Councillor Figg?
Thank you for the answer to my question, and I'll follow up to that one with a very brief preamble to make it make sense. So we have some public open space, sporting public open space, which has been delivered by developers in Eglinton, which is good for the local area, and then in a place such as Two Rocks, where it has a reserve, that could be used for sporting purposes, but isn't necessarily used that well. There isn't further public open space for sports being developed, and I know the city will be developing a significant chunk of the public open space for sporting purposes. So I'm wondering if our public open space policy as it's written here is actually effective in encouraging developers to deliver usable sporting spaces throughout the city. Does the administration feel confident that it does encourage developers to do so?
Mr Wansborough.
Through you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. Look, to the best of my knowledge, I think the policy certainly encourages the provision of sporting POS and facilities and amenities. In terms of the Eglinton Two Rocks example, look, I have to take that on notice, but I'm happy to look into that.
And did I see your hand up, Councillor Seif, before? Did you have a question? No problems. All right, no problems at all. So what I'll do is I'll start with a mover and seconder for this item. So Councillor Rowe is moving and a seconder, Councillor Seif. Councillor Rowe, did you want to have any remarks for the item?
I do. We have such a large viewing audience online. I feel like I should make some remarks. Look, I voted against this item when it last came before the committee, and while I am supporting it this evening and I appreciate all the work that the administration has done, as Mr Wansborough has said, on the track changes, it is one that I'm going to remain quite focused on for my time on council. And the three reasons that I think I articulated with my questions is we need to avoid councillors seeing inequity in the types and the standards of facilities that we have across the city. So we must maintain strong relationships with developers. Now, we can't force them to not deliver higher than a standard that is expected or wanted in the community, but what should be front and centre in our mind as council, and I hope the administration's mind, is what does that do to neighbouring suburbs and their residents when they go and visit those locations and see a standard that they do not enjoy in their own neighbourhoods. What it creates is a well-being problem and a hostility that those residents then have for other residents in the city. And I think that's a situation we need to try and avoid. The other thing that we should consider is that if we do allow developers to install facilities that are well beyond the standard provision, after a period of, I believe, 2 years, we incur the maintenance responsibility for those facilities, and then will ultimately incur the same expense for the like-for-like replacement once that facility reaches its natural life. Now, at that point, we may choose to deliver something that is of a more standard quality, and we risk disappointing the local residents because they feel that they've had a reduction in the quality of service provided, or we deliver a like-for-like replacement as it says, and we incur significant cost as a result. So given the situation that the city is experiencing with our own fiscal discipline, I think it should remain front and centre of mind, making sure that developers don't go well and truly above and beyond, knowing that we will pick up the bill for the maintenance and the replacement in due course. Second point, Chair, is that we need to make sure this policy doesn't operate in isolation. It must talk to the community facilities framework and the infrastructure plans, because that body of work will guide the retrospective renewal and refurbishment and upgrades of assets, particularly in the suburbs. And it's not just the South Ward, it is across the district. We have suburbs that do not benefit from developer contribution funds, and we need to keep that front and centre of our mind. And a tip that I hope to intend to follow, but I hope councillors do as well, we often talk about policy being a guiding document. It is true, but this one more than ever is a policy that we need to follow closely. Because if we don't, and we get petitions from residents demanding or requesting a higher standard than what the policy would allow, or we get notices of motions by councillors, it very quickly increases our capital budget throughout the financial year. It creates an unreasonable standard, and I don't think that's hypothetical. We have set precedents in the past where even in recent months we've had discussions about installing more than $100,000 worth of equipment at a park that was 400 square metres in size. We need to be more disciplined when it comes to these policies. That's not just for our long-term financial sustainability. It also means managing the expectations of our residents. Perhaps the thing we need to do when we get asked for a number of different assets is to go back to the resident and say, well, did you know that 400 metres away you already have access to a barbecue? And as a result of that, it's not feasible to install one at this location. That's a hard conversation, but it's a conversation we need to have because we're meant to be the financial stewards for this city. So it doesn't mean acquiescing to every request or demand that we get. So if we adopt this tonight, it's incumbent upon us to follow it, and it's incumbent on the administration to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. And the mover was Councillor Seif. Did you want to add any remarks?
Always in support of anything that has to do with equity across the district, you know that. I just wanted to say that it was a very good report, and the responses, you did an excellent job in looking after the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Seif. I will actually... Anyone against? Yes. Myself. I will be speaking against the recommendation, and I will give the opportunity for anyone to speak for or against after. My reasons for voting against are purely based on Schedule 2. I didn't feel the review covered a lot of the points that I wanted, I guess, at least fleshed out or researched more on, particularly around splitting the levels of some of these parks and reviewing the actual categories between pocket parks, local parks, so looking at the sizes and whether we considered at reviewing the actual measurements between what's considered local park, what's considered a neighbourhood park, because I think the way that community views some of our spaces are actually different from when the policy was first adopted. And I also think that it is absent around well, now that we've got an optional requirement, does that mean these requests are going to be approved across the district without actually having any robust framework, whether it comes through a notice of motion, whether it comes through a councillor request, whether it comes through a resident request or a petition? There's no guidance in there around what we will take on board. And I think Councillor Rowe and Councillor Seif touched on both of those points throughout their speech around the importance of why we should be keeping an eye on this document. So although the review was sufficient in terms of covering what other councillors had raised, I don't feel like it covered enough on what I had personally contributed to the workshop. So particularly in that Schedule 2 section where I would have liked to seen a bit more I guess, robust changes in how we deal with developers and also the sizing of our parks and actually reviewing some of the criteria of how that fits in. So I won't be supporting tonight's recommendation. Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for or against this item? None indicated, so we will go... Councillor Rowe, did you want to have a right of reply?
No, thank you, Chair.
No problems. So we'll go to the vote. So that is carried 4-2. The councillors that are for... Oh, hang on. Hang on, it's been reset again, councillors, if you want to cast your vote again. Just waiting for the results to come up. So that is 5-2. So the councillors for were Councillor Rowe, Mayor Aiken, Councillor Figg, Councillor Bedworth and Councillor Seif. And the two councillors against was myself and Councillor Berry. So that is carried. So now we go on to item 5.9, which is the review of the personal information privacy policy, as we have amendment on that, but I'll open the floor for any questions if there is any. None indicated. All right, so what I'll do is I'll grab a mover and seconder for item 5.9. Mayor Aitken is moving and a seconder, Councillor Figg is seconding. Did you wish to speak to the item at all, Mayor or Councillor Figg?
I'm happy to speak to the item, but you have an amendment, so do you want to speak to the amendment before I speak to the item?
Yep, I'm happy to introduce it, and if you wish to incorporate it or if you would rather me move it separately, I can do that, but I'll speak briefly if you want me
I'd
just
rather
to
you
talk about.
to move your amendment now, and then I'll speak to both, okay?
No problems, thanks, Mayor. The reason for introducing this amendment was in regards to a ratepayer concern that was had come through to the Mayor, myself and Councillor Rowe in regards to trying to access who their community representatives were on one of our advisory groups. As the administration has done, they've followed due process and currently under our current documentation and under the Privacy Act, they can't share those names. However, as a matter of transparency, I believe that any any representative on those groups should actually, as a matter of when they join those committees or advisory groups, they should actually have their name, I guess, when they nominate, they should actually be consenting up front when you join a local government. So that's the reason why I've put that forward. And Mr. Brett Matheson has worked with me to draft up a slightly changed version of that amendment from what I sent out via email, which will apply from the October 2027 council elections. So it'll be the next round, and hopefully all those forms will actually have all that information embedded in it. So it will apply from October 2027 onwards. I haven't got one yet. Councillor Rowe has just seconded. So we'll treat those as two. We'll treat them as a substantive, but we're dealing with the amendment now. So is there any councillors who wish to speak against the amendment?
Question?
I'll go to question first from Councillor Bedworth and then I'll go to the Mayor.
You just said in your speech there, Chair, that members of the community's details cannot be provided under the Privacy Act. Given that's a statute of Parliament, how is this policy going to overrule that with or without the amendment?
I will hand to Mr. Brett Matheson if he wants to add any administration comments, and then I'm happy to contribute.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through the Chair. The policy doesn't override the legislation. In fact, the purpose of this review is to check it for consistency with the legislation. It simply makes a statement as to how we will address our responsibilities under the Act. So it extends the legislation rather than providing an alternative to it.
Thank you, Mr. Brett Matheson. Just in regards to my comments, in the actual recommendation number 3, so under the legislation, if you actually name the reason why we are disclosing the names as a primary purpose of point of collection, then that is also a valid reason. So if we're clear and upfront that as part of the nomination process that will be disclosed, then I believe that covers under legislation as a primary purpose of why we collect the information.
No, it's not. If I can just ask one more question, sorry.
Yep, Councillor Bedworth.
But just for clarity, because you forgive me, this amendment came through during my work day. I've not had a chance to scrutinise it. So for clarity then, the Privacy Act doesn't actually forbid us from...
Mr. Brett Matheson, or... Oh, I think we've lost Councillor Bedworth. I think he has gone. I think the question from Councillor Bedworth was around the legislation, whether that prohibits it still. Mr. Brett Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Through yourself. The legislation doesn't prohibit us sharing information, provided that information is being shared for a primary purpose, which is aligned to our service delivery. It's got to be associated with one of our services or activities. In the case of the proposed amendment, the activity is maintaining an appropriate level of transparency around council advice and council decision making. And we'll be making it clear that when we collect that information, that will be part of what it is used for. Hence, that will then meet the test of the Act that that information is being shared for its primary purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Brett Matheson. Have you got a question? Are you okay, Councillor Rowe, if I deal with questions first and then go to you as the speaker? Yep, when he rejoins online. I don't think he's
back.
Oh, he's back. Mr. Brett Matheson, would you mind repeating that for Councillor Bedworth?
Absolutely, yes. So the gist was that we propose via this amendment to make supporting transparency around council decision making a primary purpose for which the information is collected. It will therefore be understood by the subject, the information subject themselves, that this will be information that we will share in support of that purpose, that service of the council.
Thank you. Can I just follow up with that then?
Yep, Councillor Bedworth.
To yourself, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I think the question I asked before was pretty straightforward in so much as the Act does not prevent us from publishing those details. Is that correct?
Mr. Brett Matheson.
Thank you. And through the Chair, yes, the Act, it's the Privacy and Responsible Information Sharing Act. It deliberately balances the two priorities of protecting people's personal information, but also sharing information, disclosing information, using information as is appropriate to our delivery of our services and activities.
Okay, so is that yes or no? It doesn't prevent us from doing it.
Just for clarity, it does not prevent us from sharing information.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Bedworth? I can't see you on my screen, so.
No, that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Berry and then I'll go to Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to know what the difference was between attachment 3 and attachment 4. The only thing I can see is on page 371, there's an extra paragraph under other agreements relating to data privacy. I just wanted to confirm that that was the only difference between 3 and 4. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Chair, that's correct. That is the only difference between the two versions.
I will go to Councillor Rowe because I haven't followed procedure and I apologise to the committee for that. So I will go to Councillor Rowe to speak for the amendment and then I will go to Councillor Seif to have the question. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I understand it's been workshopped throughout the day. I think it's just worth emphasising the fact that you're not sharing the contact information of community representatives on working and advisory groups. You're publishing the names, which is a very standard expectation that occurs on any ministerial or state government working group. It's very common for the names of community appointees or community delegates to be listed on the website. It's not allowing them to be tracked down and contacted by any particular individual. It's just a very good standard of transparency, and Mr. Brett Matheson has already addressed the point that matters, which is that we're not retrospectively applying this to any individual who has come on board as a community delegate following the 25 council elections. We would be incorporated into our process and ensuring that there's proper awareness and consent at the time of the 27 elections. So it's a very stock standard amendment and I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. I'll go to Councillor Seif and then the Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. So if we're going to change this to print everyone's name, to make their name available, Are we then also, is it then also possible to allow members of the public who are not on said advisory groups or committees to make submissions, written submissions to those committees? I know we have community engagement for other things, but I'm talking about just these committees.
Mr Brett Matheson.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, that would be a matter for the individual groups. If a group was wanting to engage with the community in that fashion, that would need to be built into their terms of reference. It wouldn't be specifically a privacy issue. It would be an operational issue for that group.
Councillor C.
I'm assuming that this amendment then does not allow people to opt out of having their names printed.
I'm happy to comment because it is my amendment. So the way that it is worded is it's a condition of their nomination. So they have to tick that to be selected as a nominee, the same as when councillors nominate themselves, that we put forward that that's our name. Mayor.
Thank you. I've looked at this proposed amendment and I agree with point 1 and point 2, but with point 3 I would prefer that there be more consideration. We have members on our community groups that come from different aspects and different countries. If their name is identified, that can cause trouble for them on our multicultural groups or some of our groups, that they could cause trouble for them. And I would like for item 3 to be considered and discussed further, seeing as we've only just seen this amendment tonight, and I'd like to consider it, and consider it more in that some people might choose not to join our community groups, our advisory groups, but they would be of big advantage to our groups because they know their name is going to be made public. And so I would like the opportunity to have further discussion. As I said, I support item 1, adopts it. Item 2, requests administration initiate a further review of the personal information privacy policy to conclude in time for the 2027 ordinary election. But item 3, I would rather investigate and have a further discussion so that we've probably a little bit more considered and more informed when we make this decision. And so whilst I'm not against it completely, I think we could consider it a little bit more in some of the contexts, and I would like that opportunity and maybe bring it back to the August policy forum, having more consideration with it. And so that's why I don't want to accept the amendment now, but I'm happy to look at it and review it, and I'm happy with point 1, point 2, and request administration to investigate, not incorporate. That's my reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor
Can I just ask a question? Yeah, I must be reading a different amendment. The one I got sent through at 16:45 doesn't have a point 3. So I'm not on the same hymn sheet as you guys, I'm afraid.
I will check with the council support team. Was a copy of this provided on the hub? The council support team have confirmed that it is on the hub, Councillor Bedworth.
Okay, thank you, but that wasn't communicated, so this is a bit of a surprise.
No problem. I'm happy to give you a
bearing in
couple of
mind I've
minutes.
worked up to 1800 today.
No problems, Councillor Bedworth. Happy to give you a couple of minutes to read that if you need. I think there was a hand up before. Was there a hand up before? No.
Are there any other amendments or alternatives on the hub that I need to look at?
Yes, Councillor Bedworth. There is on 5.11 and 5.10 and 5.11.
Through the chair, can we just have a point of clarification? I understand we have to adopt the updated personal information privacy policy because legislatively it has to have effect from the 1st of July. But the amendments and the review could be done later and then updated from August. So we have a conundrum here, I believe, if it could be confirmed, that we have a legislative requirement for item 1, and then the other part is an addition to that legislative requirement that I would like to, if possible, consider a little bit more. Is that correct?
Mr. Brett Matheson.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, that is correct. I've possibly not 100% clarified that in the reworded recommendation. The recommendation is to accept attachment 4 as the updated version of the policy with effect from 1st July, and then the following paragraphs put that new draft content forward into a draft policy for subsequent consideration by Policy Review Committee and Council. So it's not nailed on that wording will go through into the final approved next version of the policy exactly as it's presented.
Mayor.
Through the chair, I would suggest that the wording says that requests administration of part of a further route incorporate it, so it sort of seems to make it more concrete than if considers. That's all. That word incorporate is a lot more verb of actually doing than considering with an option to change or not. So that's one of the reasons why I want further consideration of that part. Sorry,
Mayor,
Chair.
if I can, I'm happy with the consent of Councillor Rowe to amend the word incorporate to consider incorporating. I'll leave that up to Councillor Rowe, though, if he's happy with that change, if for the sake of being able to have that review undertaken. Councillor Rowe has consented, so the word incorporated has been changed in recommendation 3 to request administration as part of that further review to consider incorporating a new subsection titled. So the underlined words on the screen is the change. Is there any further questions or comments from the committee? Apologies, that was a bit messy. So the recommendation or the amendment, sorry, is on the screen. So we will cast our vote on the amendment.
Sorry, Chair. Can you read what's on the screen out to me, please? Because I'm obviously looking at a different document now.
Yep, no problems, Councillor Bedworth. So that the Policy Review Committee, 1, adopts the updated personal information privacy policy shown in attachment 4 with effect from the 1st of July 2026. 2, requests administration to initiate a further review of the personal information privacy policy to conclude in time for the October 2027 Ordinary Council election. 3, requests administration as part of that further review to consider incorporating a new subsection titled Publication of Council Advisory Group and Committee Participation under the heading use or disclosure of personal information in the draft policy as follows. Publication of Council Advisory Group and Committee Participation. In the interest of transparency and accountability, the City will publish the name of each person appointed to, seconded to or co-opted by a Council Advisory Group, Committee, Working Group or similar body established to provide advice or guidance to Council. Publication under this clause is limited to the person's name and the group, role and term of appointment. The City will not publish individual contact details, residential addresses or other personal information without consent. Publication of a person's name for this purpose is a primary purpose for which the information is collected. The City will notify nominees of this purpose at the point of collection through the nomination or expression of interest process. An appointment is conditional on the nominee's consent to publication of their name on this basis. And point 4, request administration as part of that further review to update the relevant nomination and expression of interest forms and data collection notices and to initiate the process of reviewing the terms of reference for council advisory groups, committees and similar bodies to give effect to this subsection.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Through the chair, because we're considering incorporating, item 4 is actually incorporating it. So item 4 should be if agreed, after consideration, not because that's giving instruction to go ahead and do it.
Yep, I'm happy to remove point 4. So point 4 will be removed because then that will be in the subsequent report that comes to the committee. So just following advice from the CEO, so the amendment is for points 2 and 3, and 1 is part of the substantive. So we will vote on the amendment. So you're voting on points 2 and 3, councillors. So we'll go to the vote on that. I'm just waiting for the results. That is carried unanimously, councillors. So we'll now go to the substantive, which was moved by the Mayor and Councillor Figg. Did you want to add any remarks at all for this, Mayor?
This is obviously a legislative requirement that we need to get over the line. Item 1, and I'm happy to consider the other situation and come back after considering it and make a more informed decision if we consider other circumstances as well for the committee memberships. So I ask that councillors support the substantive as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go to Councillor Figg.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, it complies with the legislation. The amendment adds another important aspect to it, and again, echo the Mayor, just worthy of support.
Thank you, Councillor Figg. Councillor Berry, I saw your hand up. That's all good. So we will go to the vote on the substantive. So that is carried unanimously. Yep. All right, so now we go to item 5.10, and there is a alternative for this one. So we'll proceed as normal. So is there any questions on item 5.10 at all, which is the review of the strategic land policy? Councillor Rowe.
And because the alternative hasn't been moved, I'm going to try and frame my question as a bit of a hypothetical. What would administration's existing practice or process be if there was freehold or crown land that the city owned and managed and potentially had a volunteer group that had a long-standing arrangement of using that facility? If the city wanted to explore discussions about strategic land development, how would it go about that process? What level of notification and consultation would there be, not only with the primary user group, but also with the council?
Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. It would likely be a pretty gradual process, firstly with the identification of that alternative use for the site, and then secondly, sorry, Chair, am I okay to continue?
Yes, I think we've just lost Councillor Bedworth, but please continue.
Okay, no problem. Just to continue. So firstly, it would involve at some stage an identification of what that alternative use might be and the opportunities. You know, it might be zoning changes or other things that might have triggered that, or changes in the area around the site. And then beyond that, it would be looking at the current user, whether there were any alternatives with them, and then longer term working with them, most likely on what those alternatives might involve. I guess the other key part of the process is it's very, very unlikely it was something administration would do unilaterally, unless we were talking about a very small user, like someone using a meeting room in a much bigger facility. I would expect there would be things like concept forums and various things along the way. The other part is there's also the Revenue Review Committee that in the past has provided input on this. So it wouldn't be a quick knee-jerk position. It would be something most likely worked on quite closely between administration and council members.
Councillor Rowe, any further questions? Any further questions from the committee on this item? None indicated. So I'll go for a mover and seconder of the substantive. So Councillor Rowe is moving and a seconder. Councillor Seif is seconding. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against? I will speak against. The reason for speaking against is I wish for administration to take a further review of the policy. As noted in the administration comment, the East Wanneroo land acquisition strategy, if passed by council next week, will require further amendments and we'll consider further reviews and changes to the policy. So as part of that, I was hoping for the committee's support to look at further protecting community sites. Do you have a question, Mayor? Sorry.
Yeah, do you have a seconder for this? Because if you don't, I haven't.
No, I'm speaking against the
Are you
substantive
speaking
at the moment.
against, you haven't gone to the amendment yet? Okay.
Their alternate. So in regards to protecting community sites, so areas like the Wanneroo BMX Club, for example, there are heaps of other sites across the city. In my personal experience, I've found that the city is quite proactive in identifying opportunities for land to look at how we can maximise our value. However, there are some sites within the city that I would like us to have more protection for, and that requires, I would like it to require that to come to council, which means the administration won't be able to effectively plan for anything on those future sites. It's embedded in our council policy, and if council changes its strategic vision, then I believe that it's almost like a safeguard mechanism for some of those sites. And I think all of us have some in our ward, which would effectively I guess when the administration reviews for revenue review options and other processes that we have underway, it would effectively stop them from continuing to look at those sites and continue to look at either acquiring new sites or focusing on new ways to generate revenue, and would safeguard and protect the community groups that are at those certain sites. But I believe council should have a say in what those sites are. And that can obviously be reviewed when the policy gets done. So I'm just wanting that to be considered, not saying it's a guaranteed that the way that the alternates, or the way that I'm hoping for it to be changed, it's nothing to say that it will be guaranteed that it should be in the policy. It's just for it to be considered when we, or when it comes back to the next policy committee meeting. So I'm hoping that the committee would not support the substantive. Thank you. Is there any councillors that wish to speak for or against? None indicated, so we're voting on the substantive councillors, which is on page 375. So that is not carried. So the councillors voting for the item is Councillor Rowe, Councillor Figg and Councillor Bedworth. The councillors against the substantive is Mayor Aitken, Councillor Seif, Councillor Berry and myself. So that is not carried. So we now go to the alternate. Could I have a seconder for that? Mayor Aitken is seconding that one. Councillors, I will reserve my right to explain because I think I did that in my previous speech, but I will give the opportunity for the Mayor to add any remarks.
I just think it's a good idea to have more consideration, particularly with our local groups and local groups using some of the sites on leases, and as we get more information, we have a more informed decision, considering that this strategy actually affects many of our already functioning community groups, so we need to be particularly wise and considered in the decision-making process. So more information, we make a better decision. So I ask that all of my fellow councillors support the alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the alternate? Did you have a question, Councillor Figg? I'll go to the question and then I'll go to Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the administration comment on the alternative, and perhaps I've not read them in concert very well, but I don't know if the administration comment has much bearing on what the alternative actually proposes. It seems to speak to completely different issues compared to what the alternative's trying to put forward. Is there a bit of an explanation as to why, or whether there is a linkage if I've missed it?
Ms Coles said she is happy to provide further comment.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Figg. So the administration, we haven't considered in detail point 2 of the proposed alternate, but in discussion with Councillor Wright and the relevant parties, we said that we will consider that, but the policy is going to be going through a review based on the legal advice we received regarding the East Wanneroo strategic land acquisition strategy. And so we will review the policy based on that and based on the request in point 2 of this alternate, but we haven't had time to look into point 2 in detail.
Councillor Figg?
So does that mean that when point 2, or when this next comes to us, because this says it goes to an OCM, it doesn't say it comes back to us here prior to being presented. Does that mean that we'll get a summary of the effects of point 2 along with any effects that the East Wanneroo land acquisition plan will have on this policy?
Ms Coles?
Thank you for the question. So the strategic land policy will be updated in line with the legal advice if Council approves the strategic land acquisition strategy at the OCM in June. And then the policy will be updated and consider point 2 of this alternate, and then the policy will come back to the Policy Review Committee for review and discussion.
Councillor Rowe?
I'll do a question first, Chair. Semantical perhaps, but it did come up just before. Will it consider, or will it already incorporate all of what's in point 2?
Ms Coles?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Rowe. We will have to consider what's in point 2 in line with the legal advice based on Council's decision next week, and provide an update to the committee when the policy comes back. We just haven't had time today to actually run through how the requests in point 2 fit with the East Wanneroo, the changes required for the East Wanneroo land acquisition strategy.
Councillor Rowe?
So setting aside the East Wanneroo land acquisition strategy, does administration have any comment on the validity or the feasibility of any of the points raised in point 2 that we're being asked to vote on this evening?
Mr Greer?
Thank you, Chair. I think the overall comment I would make would be to echo the General Counsel's comment that it does need some further consideration. I think elements of this could be incorporated. Again, only reviewing it with fairly short notice, there is, I guess, a definitional question around what scale of sites, whether freehold, crown, by area, by type of use, by length of existing tenancy. There's a whole range of them that could be questions to be defined. But I think those are things that between our legal and our property services team could be considered, and a level of information could be incorporated in a future version. But I haven't yet turned my mind to what that list would look like right now.
Councillor Rowe, did you have further questions? Mayor?
Taking on board what Councillor Rowe's been saying, would it be wise to put in point 2 requests that administration prior to that meeting prepares a strategic land policy for consideration by the Policy Review Committee, so that what we're incorporating is we're not saying it is a done deal, we're saying is we're considering it and workshopping it and looking at it, because admin haven't had a full look at it either, because it's just a suggestion that you might consider doing that instead of putting it down as the fact that we're doing it, but as a consideration, because there might be looking at all the consequences. Is it possible to just put that in there, and that might make it a little better for fellow councillors?
CEO would like to add some comments.
Thank you. And this is sort of going back to Councillor Rowe's question and also the Mayor, so I'll do my best to answer two questions. I sort of see where the questioning is coming from. The way that this is phrased at the moment, I think provides quite clear direction to the administration in terms of what the committee's intent is. We would do our very best to implement exactly what's documented here and the instruction that's given to us. We would only come back to the committee if there was fundamentally something incorrect from probably a legal perspective as to why we couldn't. We'd provide good explanation around that. So I don't want part two to be seen as the administration's going to apply its discretion. If we like it, it's in, and if we don't like it, it's out. It's more about, I don't think that the staff at this point in time have the time to consider it in detail to find out exactly whether it can be implemented. But in saying that, we would do our absolute best.
I think certainly my intent is for it to be considered, not for it to be actually implemented, and I'm happy for that to be minuted if councillors feel more comfortable with that. But my similar what we did before, it's for a consideration to be considered in the future revision, not actually put in there. Councillor Rowe, is that?
Does that need to be documented in the recommendation to clarify it?
Yep, I'm happy for that to be considered in the, would that be in the reason for the alternate? Because that gets published in the minutes. So we'll keep the wording the same, but just going off General Counsel's advice, because the reason for the alternate is published in the minutes with the decision, then that will be in the minutes as a formal record. General Counsel's just providing some further advice. Thanks, Councillor Seck. Apologies, committee. It is very hard trying to chair and move amendments and alternates. So I did seek advice about relinquishing the chair to give it, but as our deputy chair is online, that is quite hard to do. So General Counsel has provided me with some advice. So recommendation 2 could be seen as request that administration prior to that meeting prepares a revised strategic land policy and supporting report that considers the following. So I'll reread that again. Request that administration prior to that meeting prepares a revised strategic land policy and supporting report that considers the following. Councillor Figg with a question.
A question and possibly speaking against, but I know that, okay. So the question, which I should have written down, yes, so this is obviously the alternative. The substantive has already been cast aside. If it was to be voted down, would it be administration's prerogative to bring the strategic land policy back to us at some stage or another?
General Counsel.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Figg. So subject to council considering the report that's going to be considered at the OCM on Tuesday night, the policy will come back to this committee based on the changes that need to be made to the policy at that point for the East Wanneroo changes. That's when the policy will come back. So if the alternate's lost tonight, the policy will come back at a future stage.
Councillor Figg.
Thank you. So I guess just, to clarify, so just a bit of a, I guess it just happens to be because of the timing that we happen to get it back. But I assume that admin could have brought it back to us anyway. That only relates to the fact that if we were to vote it down or, split it, and I don't want to make it more messy, but, have 1 and then 2 and 3 as separate items. But we don't need to do that, which is excellent because I don't want to split it. So I would like to speak against if I could. I think there are mechanisms to do this. I genuinely like the idea that we give our community groups some level of tenure and understanding that they have their space to use. I think we do that already through our leasing. I think leases are that mechanism already. Whether we want to extend leases further or make them more specific, I think we can do that on a case-by-case basis. I also think that if a community group has use of a site, we could make it part of the policy that if we were to remove a user of a site, that the item has to come to a full council, so we can consider that. I don't think we need to have a blanket that can't be considered list. I think it's probably a little bit of overkill. I also have some reservations about point 3 in having the committee being able to add sites or remove sites. I think that introduces some risk. There's some personal biases and other factors could come into decisions. We all have groups that we love and support, and we don't want that to become an influence on our decision making. And I think this introduces the risk that it could be. I think that overall, I think we have mechanisms to deal with this issue. And whilst I truly respect and understand the intent of it, and I like the idea of our community groups having a level of security, I think we have those mechanisms already. And I don't think our administration would seek to move anyone on from their site without us having some line of sight on that. And if it were to happen, I think there'd be, some pretty significant words had anyway. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Figg. I did indicate to Councillor Rowe that he can speak against. Is there a councillor who wants to speak for? None indicated. Councillor Rowe will allow you to speak against.
Thanks, Chair. I'll back up almost everything that Councillor Figg just said, and building upon it, and perhaps the example, Chair, that you've been alluding to with the Wanneroo BMX situation, which I can't comment on intimately because I wasn't involved in that process. But what I do understand is that Council did have involvement in that process under this existing policy, and whether that be through input through a working group, and then ultimately the decision of this full council to disband that working group to ensure that the club had guidance and certainty around their future, and then the reapproval of a long-term lease. So to Councillor Figg's points that he raised earlier, we have to ask ourselves, is there existing mechanism within the policy to provide protection and input for council? And the answer is yes. So therefore, why do we need to do this?
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Is there any councillor that wishes to speak for the alternate? Councillor Seif.
I may have to be a little bit cryptic, but I do agree that there are mechanisms in place already. I do agree with actually everything that yourself and Councillor Figg have said. However, we have had a situation where there are mechanisms in place, and I won't mention what that is because that was behind closed doors, and it failed. And it was raised and should have been addressed. This is, I'll just say this is before the current CEO. It was raised and it was not addressed and came back then a year later even though mechanisms were in place. So for that reason, and if this was for a 12-month trial period or two-year trial period or something like that, I'd probably be more comfortable with it. But because of the historical situation where the mechanisms failed, and then even though they were pointed out, continued to fail, that's why I'm voting for. And I know it's slightly different, but it speaks to a culture.
Thank you, Councillor Seif. Is there any councillor that wishes to speak against? No.
If I could, Chair.
Yep, Councillor Bedworth.
I'll keep it short and sweet. Thank you. I do respect the intent behind this. I think it's come to us with good intent. But like has been alluded to previously, I'm just concerned that we're now delving into a little bit of operational overreach, and these sort of matters with the mechanisms in place are already well taken care of. And I feel that this should be left as a matter for administration. We would hear about it soon enough if there was an unfair decision to move on a community group, and we could deal with it there and then. So for those reasons, I can't support this, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Bedworth. We just heard your last bit before you cut out. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for? No indication, so I will use my right of reply. Thank you, committee members, for expressing views on this item, and I can definitely see that there are valid arguments on both sides. The intent for bringing this consideration for us was around the approach that the administration takes. While I see our property team does an absolute fabulous job at bringing us new sites, bringing us opportunities for the city, and considering to meet this policy, which provides some pretty clear guidance on what council's appetite is. I saw that there was a need and opportunity to have a safeguard in place. And I will use the example that Councillor Rowe brought up around the Wanneroo BMX Club. That obviously working group was around for a long time prior to my time on council, but there was ongoing issues, and the Deputy Mayor's not here to also elaborate on that, but there were some issues in regards to administration still pushing the point that it is a freehold site and that it was considered of commercial interest to the city. And I expressed my views that the club had been there for a long time, and that we obviously needed to look at other opportunities elsewhere and to leave that community group. And that was obviously the view of the working group at the time. I believe that every now and again there is always conversations when having long-term discussions around our strategic vision, and sometimes when there are no mechanisms in place to protect those particular lots with those groups on at the moment, it tends to be, my personal view is administration sees as an opportunity to look at how it can maximise those lots for other opportunities. And while that certainly fits with the intent of our policy, because we want to obviously, strategic land, it can be used for other purposes. I want there to be a safeguard in place at the discretion of council of what that can be. And effectively, I see this as an opportunity to stop administration from entertaining other options and to consider that those groups be kept in place and effectively, I don't want to say calls it dead land, but land that is effectively not being able to use for any other strategic purposes or intent under this policy. So I'm wanting to create that safeguard in place, and I certainly think that the alternate does, but obviously now that the new alternate obviously is considering this, then certainly the administration can flesh out in more detail for us for the next review. So it's not a guarantee that this goes through, it's considering that administration considers the review, and that's why I would ask my fellow committee members to please support this, as it's only asking for more information now to be considered for the next time this item comes to us. Thank you. So we will now cast our votes on the alternate recommendation. I can't see. Councillor Bedworth is not supporting, so the recommendation has just disappeared from my screen. So the alternate. The recommendation 4 is 4-3. So the councillors in support is myself, Mayor Aitken, Councillor Berry and Councillor Seif. And there's 3 councillors opposing. That's Councillor Rowe, Councillor Figg and Councillor Bedworth. So the alternate has passed. So we now go on to item 5.11, execution of documents policy. And there is an amendment on this, apologies committee, from myself again. So we will, sorry, I'm just catching up on my iPad. So the substantive is on page 393. I will go to the committee for any questions first. Is there any questions from the committee on item 5.11? None indicated. So I will ask for a mover and seconder first for this item, for this substantive. So the Mayor is moving the substantive. And a seconder, Councillor Figg is seconding. I will go for any remarks from the Mayor and Councillor Figg before I move an amendment. Mayor?
I think it's just something that happens, so I'm quite happy with it as it is. But yeah, thank you.
Councillor Figg?
I'm okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I move an amendment to the committee floor. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Rowe is seconding. Thank you, Councillor Rowe. So I'll briefly explain my reasons for. Please note that this version is different from the one that I circulated with committee members. It has removed points B and C and now only considers funding and grant agreements. And the reason for this, adding a caveat that it should only exceed anything over $1 million, council should be entitled to see the grant agreements. And the reasons for that was ongoing issues that council faced, particularly with the Wanneroo Sports Hub project. And there were a few other projects that council had significant questions around the particular clauses within the grant agreement, which involved reviewing different sites, reviewing information. I believe with projects of that size, we should be able to see the grant agreement and what that considers, and does it lock council in, and any other information. So it's just a check and balance to be in there, particularly for anything that's over $1 million, which is usually in our strategic projects sort of working group. So anything large of that size and scale. So I've just thought it was more of an improvement to the existing policy by not changing anything fundamentally, but just requiring administration to provide some notification, whether that's through a briefing note, whether that's a confidential attachment. I've left it up to the administration to deem what it should come in, depending on what the item is, noting that some might be live items, some may be other significant projects that we deal with in our budget. So I will leave my comments there. Councillor Rowe, did you have anything further to add?
Just a couple of comments, Chair. In times gone past, one of the questions we ask often in this place is whether modifying a project or delaying a project will impact the funding agreement and the security of the funding that's been provided. I think having some assurance of being able to see the document at that point in time gives us a greater sense of certainty as to what any kind of impact would be of reconsideration or modification. And the other point that I would note is that the city, I think, has done its level best to deliver projects in a reasonable timeframe and on budget. And when we face scrutiny or commentary that I think is somewhat unfair in other places, being able to have the assurance of knowing what is included in the funding agreement is quite pivotal, because in certain projects we can look to when that funding agreement was signed and when a project actually became under the management or jurisdiction of the city. Because when we have access to that information, it allows us to get on the front foot of shaping the narrative of the truth and not allowing the city to be positioned in such a way that it appears that we're not delivering on our capital work program, because we certainly are. And I know it's something that the CEO has taken on board personally, and making sure our stakeholders, whether they be members of parliament and government departments, are well aware of our progress. So this is just another level of transparency for us to have that certainty that we are staying on top of things, and that notification is a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the amendment? None being indicated. So we will now vote on the amendment. So that is carried unanimously, councillors. So the substantive as amended. The mover was Councillor Amir Aitken, sorry, and the seconder was Councillor Figg. I've already given you a right of reply, so we'll go to the vote on the substantive as amended. Thank you, councillors. So that is carried unanimously. Okay, thankfully I'm done. So we will go to item 7.2, which will now be a workshop, community engagement policy and draft public community engagement framework. So I will call for a mover and seconder to suspend the standing orders, which will enable us to have a workshop discussion. Mover, Mayor Aitken, and a seconder, Councillor Seif. So if we could go to the vote on that to suspend the standing orders to enable workshop discussion. Just waiting for the results. That is carried unanimously. So I will hand over to Director Davis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. As this is a workshop, I will hand over to the Manager of Place, who is specifically here to hear your feedback on the draft policy. And in good faith, we've also provided the draft framework for context. Thank you.
Over to you, Mr. Starwatts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Davis. This report presents the draft revised community engagement policy to the Policy Review Committee, and alongside that is the draft public community engagement framework. So rather than progress the policy review in isolation, we're proposing to present both have presented both documents to Policy Review Committee tonight for feedback and comment and input. And subject to the feedback received, we're proposing that we present both those items to Council for consideration, to consider advertising them both concurrently for public comment. The City's community engagement policy is deliberately high level. It focuses on the principles of engagement, when the City will engage and when it won't engage, and what its approaches are to community engagement aligned to the IEP2 spectrum. The proposed community engagement framework is something that's previously been internal to administration, but we're proposing to make public as it supports the community engagement policy. And what the framework proposes to do is provide a bit more detail around the different types of engagement approaches and when they should be used or considered, how, where and when engagement should occur, and the roles of administration, council members and council and community members in the engagement process. The draft community engagement framework has previously been workshopped and presented at Concept Forum on 2 occasions, albeit in a more draft version than the current one being presented tonight. And the feedback that we've received has been used to finalise this draft that you see before you. In those discussions, we also heard really positive, constructive feedback from council members around a desire to see us improve our consistency and standard of community engagement processes, how we improve access to community engagement and items being considered by minority groups or those that don't necessarily have access to the digital realm, and improving how we present information to Council in Council reports, both on our proposed approaches to community engagement and the results and outcomes of community engagement activities. Given the important role that community engagement plays in our decision-making process, we're seeking specific feedback and comment on the draft policy as revised and the draft public community engagement framework, and specifically feedback on both of those documents, constructive, both positive and negative, and whether there is support from the Policy Review Committee to present those two documents to Council with the intent to undertake community engagement on the community engagement documents themselves. The intent behind that is to present them holistically and be a bit more transparent and open about how we undertake our engagement processes here at the City. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions, comments, feedback from the committee.
Thank you, Mr Starwatts. And just for the purpose of the minutes, Councillor Bedworth has lost internet connection and has advised the City that it won't be able to rejoin. So just noting on page 42, we have 3 questions that the administration is posing. So I'll open the floor for questions, comments, opinions and anything in between. Mayor?
Thank you. I like the report and I think engagement is really important. But I go to page 72 of the supplementary agenda and I look at contribute and it talks about surveys and polling. Now, my concern with some of this, and I want our surveys and our polling to be far more methodologically sound without bias, because if they're not methodologically sound, then we have small groups that can bias the result and we have misinformation for moving forward. I would like to be a bit more clear on how these are going to be made more methodologically sound and that, because I think the surveys and pollings is really important, but the concerns of some of the decision-making processes that we've made and the influence we've had to go through because of a small, relatively small minority group that are very, very loud, yet our average ratepayer is probably happy for it to happen, but they're so busy putting food on the table and a roof over their head, they think it's going to happen. They don't have an axe to grind because they're happy with it. Then we have the ones that have an axe to grind and they influence very strongly. So with the community engagement, that has always been a really big concern for me, and I just want to clarify how we're going to do that in an ethically correct basis. Thank you.
That's been noted. Did you want to add anything, Mr Starwatts?
I can respond through the Chair if you wish, yeah. Thank you, Mayor, for your question and comments. We have heard that feedback from council members at Concept Forum previously. I think that there is an opportunity to improve how and when we look to get statistically valid samples from our community that presents a broad spectrum of feedback so that we avoid the bias that can sometimes result from local sensitivity. To do that obviously does take a bit more time and effort, so we are exploring how, through the process of determining the engagement approach up front when preparing the community engagement plan, perhaps through more of a risk approach or considering social impact. Depending on the nature of the project, it might be times when it's more appropriate to have that statistically valid sample that we can report against, and then other more low risk impact projects where it may not be resource appropriate to do that.
Mayor? Yep.
Yes, I do understand that when you're diving deep into research, it can be quite expensive, but some of our projects are worth quite a lot of money, and so maybe the research and the polling we do need to be applied appropriately as a percentage of the value of the project so that we have resources in the project budgeting that we can get. Because what happens is we can get some polling and be biased and we lose a whole project that's worth multiple millions of dollars because we haven't got statistically sound evidence. If we had that maybe that project wouldn't have been lost or would have been done a little bit differently and not gone through all the stress with the community and that happening. So starting off with that, and maybe as a percentage of what the overall budget for the project is looking at, becomes part of what we do. Just a suggestion so that we can work towards getting more information without bias. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Ms Davies?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I also would like to add on to what Mr Starwood said, in that we also invite elected members to reflect on and give feedback throughout this process on the opportunities that arise through engagement where it is not possible to appease all members of community. We are aware of other local governments that are supporting and assisting their elected members in this space, particularly through the reform process. And you've outlined some really significant areas where that influence through the engagement process may not be what's in the best interest, and as key decision makers we can help you through this framework and the policy to do those decision making in a suitable way within your role.
Thank you, Ms Davies. Any further comments, Mayor?
Not at the moment, thank you.
No problems. Councillor Rowe?
Thank you, Chair. I think all of mine are statements, but I think that's permissible in workshop setting. I'll just sort of run through them. The first, and I hope they kind of address the questions, but they're just whatever's going on in my mind. The Your Say page. I hope that over time that functionality can improve, because what we often get told by residents is that when they put their email address in to receive notifications of forthcoming consultations or engagements, that they don't ultimately receive them in a very consistent manner. And you'd like to think that that would be a way that we can proactively ensure that if someone is interested in a particular topic or a particular project, that the maturity of our systems would allow that individual to feel that they would have a consistent opportunity to engage in that process. So I understand this is a framework and a policy, but we would then need to ensure that our systems that help put into practice those two documents are actually functioning properly. It's true that they've got a facelift. I no doubt that they look better, but my understanding from the residents that I've spoken to is that they're still not functioning at full potential. Chair, are you happy for me to just, keep the lecture going? Good. The second would be that I would like the city to get better at being able to communicate with residents from the outset around what are valid grounds for objection. And this may be referring to our good friends over there in the planning department, and I know I've had conversations with Mr DeVekis. If we're advertising a development application in particular, but it could be any related project, we need to be clear from the outset what are the valid grounds of consideration that council or the administration under delegation would show due regard for. Because if we don't tell people that from the outset, we're setting ourselves up for failure and a PR disaster. And there have been examples in the past where I don't think we've been as on the front foot as we could be of telling residents that those, even the line that Mr Dixon used to always say to us, it's not a valid planning consideration. So if it's not, and a council member were to make a decision that ignored that fact, we're opening ourselves up to risk to our reputation, and then also to appeal through a higher body like SAT. And setting a precedent. So that's predominantly planning, but it also makes sense from a community perspective as well. So language like showing due regard or considering, and I can see you've got that throughout the framework, that consult doesn't mean that every single idea, regardless of its feasibility or cost, is automatically taken on board and actioned, because that's just not possible. And we need to be very clear and consistent in our language. At the moment, we receive through our Wanneroo Wrap newsletter a little bit of a table that provides forthcoming consultation or engagement periods. I think some managers are more consistent than others of contacting ward councillors or councillors as a whole when there's a project coming up in our own area I think while councillors wouldn't want to interfere in the engagement process, I think it can be appreciated and respected that we do know the sensitivities of our own local areas. And if we're aware that a particular project may be quite contentious, that it may result in significant pushback to the city, and the city were to tell us that you were only doing a 400 metre square radius notification, we might provide some input that's taken under consideration that a project of that nature, of that sensitivity, might benefit from a larger consultation process. It's ultimately at the discretion of the administration if you want to choose to do that, but I think we can be a source of local knowledge to help guide that process and limit risk to the city and to the council. Another point that I wanted to raise was our forms of traditional comms and how we engage with stakeholders who don't necessarily use online media. The example that I would use is Girraween Hub, and I do credit Ms Davis and her team for getting that project, and Ms Russell I see there, for getting that project back on board. But the early days, that was a very rocky situation of consultation, because I think we applied a sort of standard process to a user group that was vulnerable and needed a much more nuanced form of communication that ensured that user group felt safely brought along in the journey and heard and valued. So it's where we need to show discretion and deviation from a framework to understand who is the user group, how can we protect and safeguard their interests. That's something that can't always appear in a document, so I don't expect you to reflect that through here, but it's something that I'd ask the administration to take on board. And an extension of that is, how do we engage with our cold communities, our individuals who English is a second language? And there's an example I can think of recently of a situation where I think we could have improved in that regard, whether it's through access to interpreters or translating our material into the common languages that are spoken across the city of Wanneroo. It's all valid points to suggest for improvement. And then the final point I wanted to raise is that I would hope that community engagement and engaging with the community more broadly could be something that forms the councillor induction process, because we deal with residents from the moment we're elected, if not before, in a candidate capacity. And understanding the regulatory environment and how to do so in a safe and respectful manner from the outset ensures to the best degree possible that we all play by the same rulebook and we stand in solidarity. Because I know even now there's competing views around the table of what community consultation means and what serving your community means. For some, it may be to acquiesce to every single thing that's suggested. I don't think that is the case. So an induction process that not only provides councillors with knowledge, but also strategies for how to respond to and engage in a safe manner with our residents is an important thing. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. Did the administration want to add anything, or we'll take those as comments?
I'm happy to take that as comments. Thanks, Chair. Thanks,
No
Councillor
problem.
Roy.
Councillor Figg.
Thank you, Chair. My first two are actually echoing some of Councillor Rowe's comments. So the Your Say page, the facelift is good. However, there have been instances, and I know, again, this is a practical part of it, not really set out within the framework, but where the information that's important to be able to make a submission is somewhat buried a bit further down than it should be. That's been one instance, and also personally, so it is anecdotal, I have signed up for updates for certain things and I don't get them. So I know that there's something amiss in there. And given the maturity of the site, as Councillor Rowe said, that's a big opportunity to increase people's buy-in to the engagement process. The valid grounds for planning decisions, I think, is vital. And more broadly, expectation setting. We know what we're capable of making a decision on, and we know which decisions are made by other entities where we're only tasked with paying for and conducting community engagement. So particularly for those items going to the outer metro development assessment panels, what I'm speaking of. Making sure that people are aware, and I have noted some improvement in this where it says that the city is not the decision maker. We do make a recommendation, and oftentimes residents might misinterpret a recommendation to approve with conditions as a decision that we just support the blanket development that's being proposed, when in reality we understand that we have only so many choices to ensure that a development doesn't have too many amenity impacts. The example I would use is probably the McDonald's or the Woolworths in Two Rocks, so we've got some significant design alterations, knowing that the JDAP was going to approve those two proposals no matter what the city came through with. But making sure that people know what the valid grounds are, and then also setting expectations, particularly when it comes to approximate budgets for things. If we're going out and saying that we're going to be doing some park improvements and we don't tell residents what we're looking to spend in an approximation, then we're going to get suggestions like a brand new playground and gazebos and multiple barbecues and toilet blocks for a budget of $150,000, and it's just not going to happen. So I think that helps as well. Two other items of my own, where I'm not just borrowing from Councillor Rowe. One is the letters that we do. And forgive me, I'm not intimately aware of exactly the radii for each type of proposal, but my understanding is it's around 400 metres for the vast majority. And that example, again, I think a couple of those development applications I mentioned earlier, one of them, that was a 400 metre radius for a proposal that ended up getting about 404 responses, which is a lot for us. And then it's the similar thing for a passive park upgrade, which I think 400 metres is valid for a passive park upgrade, whereas I don't know if we hit the mark when it comes to those larger projects. That probably does buy into Councillor Rowe's points on where councillors have that knowledge of an area. I also think there are some obvious ones where we don't really need to raise our voice and say we should make this a bit larger. I think some of them are a bit more obvious. And that brings me to my last, which is actually, again, a bit more of a practical thing than something that's specific to the framework. But our What's Happening newsletter, I think a councillor made a comment in recent months that it's more about what happened rather than what's actually happening. And the last few that I've had, I don't really remember, and I could be mistaken, but I don't really remember seeing any that said, oh, we've got these, this is out for consultation at the moment. You also run into issues there where you go, okay, what do you put in something that goes to all residents? Do you do the larger items? Do you do every item? Do you do that passive park in Wanneroo when residents in Yanchep are going to be reading and going, why is this with me? So those are my points on the broader way that we consult. Just quickly shifting to, I think it was the first question about attachment 2, which is the track changed policy. I'm just going to point everyone to page 51 about when the city engages. So community engagement will be undertaken where decisions have a community impact, and I'm not sure we even need that point. I think that almost every decision we have has an impact. I think that's probably a bit too broad. I can understand why administration has included. I understand that it's supposed to be something that has some level of, I guess, for want of a better way to put impact. But I think that's probably a bit too broad, because you could argue that almost anything we do has an impact on the community. And I'm wondering if there's any thoughts on that one, both from other committee members and also from administration on that.
Is there any view from the committee on that point? Yep, Councillor Seif.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Figg, because I was looking at that as well. Initially, underneath that point, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points that have been scratched out or changed. But I understood that the reason why they've all been scratched out is because they all come under the decisions have a community impact. So that's the reason why. So I think that first bullet point is meant to be broad so that it does encompass everything. And therefore you don't need to be so prescriptive, because when you get too prescriptive you might be able to miss out some nuance, and that having that broad community engagement will be undertaken where decisions have a community impact. I think that's quite safe and quite important to keep there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seif. Mayor?
Yes, when Councillor Figg talked about letters, my eyes lit up. A lot of the letters we send from the City of Wanneroo are very accurate documents, but they are complex because they're written within the field of experts who are very expert in planning, very expert in what's happening with building, very expert in that, but they're not very expert in keeping it simple so the community understands. And so I will make this statement that I've made before. When I wrote my thesis, which I was awarded first class honours, I had to do it at 12-year-old level writing, so that it was easy to understand, easy to comprehend and easy to read. If you're talking to another expert in your field, you would talk comprehensively that way. But if you're doing a community consultation or something about planning, when we're engaging with the community who are not experts in what's happening, can we please keep it simple and at grade 7 standard? If I had to write my honours at grade 7, I'm sure it would be okay if we wrote to our community at that level so that they could understand it was more easy to comprehend and not technically so specific that they look at it and chuck it in the bin and then wonder why what's happening down the street when it actually happens. Just a suggestion with consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got Councillor Rowe and then I'll go to Councillor Berry.
I recently reread my honours paper and it was a pile of trash, so I don't know how I got through that year. But I do actually have a valid point, which is what I would like to see, if I can, is the extension of the community engagement process, that it ends with that very important communication piece of celebrating the win or getting on the front foot, as to some of the comments we've already heard. If the city's not the sole decision maker or not the decision maker at all, I would like to know how our community place team potentially engages with communications and brand now that they're not under the same directorate. They did used to be, now that they're not. Because it could be a simple example of going to community. Okay, you provided input on this project has been delivered, and now we're communicating out the win and the benefit to you as residents so you can see the input that you had in making this project possible. That actually builds trust in the city's reputation and trust in our ability to be able to deliver for the community. And conversely to that situation, if we know that actually it's somewhat similar, if we know that our involvement through our expert planners and our delegates on DAP resulted in positive alterations that made the impact less severe on the community, we need to get on the front foot. And then finally to that, if we know that we were not the decision maker and we could anticipate the outcome, the city doesn't ever do a media release when a DAP decision is made. Never. And I think that would be an opportunistic to put in that mechanism where we can actually say, get on the front foot, because if our consultation, if we are the ones having to pay for the DAP letters, it is our city logo on that letterhead, it's very difficult for a resident to differentiate that we're not the decision maker. So could a media release or some form of proactive comms assist the city in shaping the narrative that we did what we could, here's what we were able to achieve, but here's the reason why we couldn't achieve the absolute impact because we weren't the decision maker. Those are just all thoughts running through my head.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. I will go to Councillor Berry and then we'll go back to Councillor Figg. And then Councillor
Thanks,
Figg.
Chair. Following on from what Councillor Rowe just said, I do think it would be also a good opportunity to be able to say if it's not in our jurisdiction, who residents before the decision is made can actually go to. So if it is the DAP or, you know, in the case of MRC, it's to go to DEWA or whatever it is, if they've got that opportunity and know where to give their feedback, that could help as well for them to differentiate if it's us or not us. Timing of engagement, and I will refer to the fishing platform. That engagement was done 2 and a bit years before the decision was made. If we're going to give them engagement that early on, I do think it is worth them revisiting that engagement. And I have a question, and I'm not sure who I direct this to. Who checks the Have Your Say page for the content on there, please?
Mr. Starwaltz. Sorry, sir, would you be able to just pop a mic? Is that okay? It's just so our fellow councillors that also watch this and the community can hear the response. Thank you. Just the button on the right-hand side.
Right. So can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yeah. So for all engagements, the city develops an engagement plan. Under our framework, managers are accountable for engagements. So I'm the city's community engagement advisor, and I work with all the teams to plan strategically for all our engagements. And the plan's developed jointly between communications and brand, community engagement, and managers. Managers have the final sign-off, but everything is documented, and everything in your say is signed off by comms and brand, and before it goes live.
Thank you for that. Councillor Berry.
I have a follow-up then, and I'm not sure which manager this would sit under, but we currently have a survey. It's called the City of Wanneroo Communications and Marketing. It's currently live on our website. I've just tried to do it on my phone, and it says, pick the way, your top 3 that you pick to engage with the city. And you have several choices: Facebook, website, Instagram, email, newsletters, SMS alerts, What's Happening magazine, printed materials, letterbox drops, Wanneroo link, and in the news. Pick your top 3. You can only select one. I do think if we're going to put surveys out, we do need to ensure they're working, because that one clearly isn't. And my last point to make would be, I would echo what Councillor Figg said. You sign up for the updates and you don't actually get them, because I'm also signed up for updates for things that happen in my area and they don't come through to me. Thank you.
I will allow the director, if you do want to elaborate on any comments as well, and feel free to pass on to anyone else within your team.
Excuse me, thank you, Chair, and would like to introduce Mr. Stangers into the chambers as the current, your role, John, is as the
Engagement advisor.
Engagement advisor, thank you. And John reports straight through to Mr. Starwaltz under Manager of Place in Community Engagement. Council members have been brought along on the journey for Reimagine Wanneroo, and as you would have already seen, that we have advocated on your behalf through that process and have been able to have a community engagement itself will become a centralised service for the city. It is coupled in as a strategic engagement and comms area. So really looking at bringing a lot of the feedback that we've heard, that I've particularly heard through yourselves and every item that comes to council in the last 2 years about the improvements that are required, specifically under the Your Say, and where we've had that as our single source of truth. We think that this improvement in the future is actually going to give us the opportunity to investigate a lot of the current best practice in this space. There's there's portals, there's strategic data sets that we can use that the city can then apply across all of its service units quite consistently and bring in that comms perspective. So that's going to look at the letters and that consistency, as well as some of the improvements that you've picked up. Another really great point was the inductions, the council inductions. So thank you. I can't remember which council member it was that gave us that feedback, but that's really wonderful. The framework and the policy that are before you today do have some things that I did discuss with the team around that 400 square metres and the timeframes, different mediums that we engage with and the signage, and where the policy includes the timeframes. So they've been some really very, very helpful discussions, and also your note around the discretion, which obviously our rangers rely on quite heavily through local law. So where engagement is dealing with people and humans, sometimes that discretion around the timing and what's current and what's complex is going to be really important. So thank you for that. The libraries, just would like to also put at the front of everyone's mind that we have 5 fabulous libraries, several community hubs. They have got a reach of an estimated 80% of our community, which is often those harder to reach populations, and are excellent forums for engagement, which we work closely with the planning team to make sure that those ones can be in their libraries. And I will close out on my ramble. Not only are we always looking for opportunities for continuous improvement, and I pick up on the comment on contacting ward councillors and key stakeholders, for example, Gungaroo, BMX Park and Pump Track. So letting those funding providers know if that is, or bringing ward councillors along, but also closing that loop when, for example, the heritage surveys have closed, that process is completed, and we can come back to that ward councillor and say, thank you, and this is where you can find updates so that you guys can actually promote that through as part of your role. Thanks for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you, Director Davies, and I can agree and concur with those as well. The team have done a fantastic job. I will go to Councillor Figg to continue, and then I've got Councillor Seif, and then I'll go back to Councillor Berry if there's any further.
Thank you, Chair. So I just kind of want to move into very briefly on the wins. I'm really stealing from Councillor Road tonight, but, I even took your speaking against earlier, so it's been fun. I think we do need to capitalise on wins. We have a lot of them, but the community, to be quite frank, they don't care unless we really, they've got to see it 5 or 6 times before they understand that it's something that we've done. Whereas when it comes to consultation, they will automatically first step assume it's us. So along with press releases, with a final letter to those who we've engaged with, or an email, whatever I have, depending on the level of engagement or the project size, I think are both very important tools. But there's another one which I think we miss out on pretty severely, and that's signage, particularly for large projects. The example I use mainly here is probably the Alkimos Aquatic and Recreation Centre. You can see a building, looks wonderful. Unless you are clued in, or unless you're there 6 months down the track and you've only seen it, 5 or 6 times said on social media, you probably wouldn't know what it is. There's no signage to indicate that the city's building this $88 million facility, which is going to serve the whole North Corridor for decades to come. And my assumption would also be that from the streets that surround it, which are 2 main roads, Romeo Road and Marmion Ave, that we don't have anything in the future that'll show that. Obviously, when it's open, it will be a different story. People will be able to go there and they'll see that. But while it's being built, I think showcasing what we're doing is very important. And I think the same would go for a whole bunch of other projects. I use Alkimos Aquatic Centre only because it's a bit unique in that it's set back from most major roads where you can see the infrastructure and the signage from that road. I imagine the Dordak Kep Up as an example, you probably could have seen the works and you could have seen City of Wanneroo signage around it. You can't see that with some other projects. And then outside of the practicalities, I did want to just shift briefly to the questions that administration actually has for us. Just moving to page 72, the community participation and engagement level, and it's the engagement level matrix. As a whole, and I should probably just say now, I want to address those questions as part of this. So I think it was question 2 would be for the framework. I understand why it's there. I like the idea of it. I've read through it and I find it a bit wishy-washy. I don't actually know what we do, having read through it. It doesn't tell me much other than a really, really broad overview. Maybe that's the idea, and if it is, I don't mind. But having read through it, it doesn't tell me, if I was a member of the public, what actually happens when you consult. It's just a really, really vague idea. And I think a really good example that shows that is on page 72. It's got the engagement tools on the left. So the second box is down, and it's the last one on the right there. It has partner or lead as the community role, and it has ballots and citizen juries. And I'm not sure we've ever done those. I don't know what they are or why they're in a document that we have. If we are doing them and if we intend to, again, happy to be corrected there. But just I think there could be some work on the framework. The policy itself is good for me. I think that we'll keep going through this after the workshop when some refinements are made. But I just wanted to point out with the framework, I'm not entirely comfortable with where it's at the moment. It looks pretty, but it doesn't really say much for me. Thank you.
Did the admin want to add any comments on any of those points? Yep, Mr. Starwoods.
Yeah, thank you through the chair, and thank you, Councillor Figg, for your feedback, and everyone for your feedback so far. Just to comment on the community engagement level matrix on page 72, that is a bit of a toolkit or an example of, for each engagement approach in the hierarchy across the top, from inform through to empower, it lists a range of types or tools of engagement that administration may use for any one project. It's probably worth mentioning at this stage that, for a simple project, you may only have one type of engagement, and you may only use one or two tools. But for a larger project, whether it be a larger capital project or a master planning project, you may actually have multiple types or phases of engagement, where your early stage may involve involving the community or a collaborative approach to developing or assessing a range of options or scenarios, and that may include using one or more of, or generally more than one tool or type of engagement. And then as that project is developed and moves through the council approval process, you may end up with a final master plan that then is subject to an inform or a consult level engagements, and there's different tools that are used at that stage. So I think, based on your feedback, we can look at tightening that up a little bit, but it is intended to provide an overview of the types of engagement and tools that are appropriate at each stage or different approach in the hierarchy.
Councillor Figg.
Sorry, thank you. Just a very brief follow-up. Thank you for that answer. It does help. I guess what might help, rather than going back and trying to refine or tighten things, because it does read reasonably well, it just doesn't say much, perhaps a couple of case studies of what we do for the ARC or for Dorado Kepup and the sort of process we followed. Maybe not some other more recent projects which have been a little more contentious within the city, but I think a couple of projects that outline from a neighbourhood level park upgrade to one of our larger projects, just to really indicate to people what level of feedback we seek from people when it comes to different levels of infrastructure spending. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's been noted. Councillor Seif and then Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief. Letters, first off. Yeah, we do need to make them a lot more simple. They should be able to, I agree, they should be able to be read by a 12-year-old. That's how newspaper articles are written as well. Madam Mayor and Councillor O, you are very right. So a 12-year-old needs to be able to read everything of ours. There was a recent letter that went out to a resident that had, it was about an alleyway in Alexander Heights, and I saw that letter, and I did cringe. On the inside, I was cringing really badly. It came across quite harsh and almost, in my view, aggressive. It could have been misinterpreted as an aggressive way, and it wasn't intended that way, but that's how it came across. And in my view, all of those sorts of letters need to go past the marketing department. Any client-facing letter needs to go past the marketing department, in my view. Posters are really, they're old school, I know, but they are very effective, and I do not see City of Wanneroo posters in our community centres. They're a very effective way to get to community groups, including COWD groups, special interest groups, seniors groups, if we have posters in our community centres with maybe a QR code. But again, for people who are not good with technology, like our seniors and anyone else who's not good with technology, just even having a stack of printed forms where they can check the boxes and do your survey by ticking the box, folding it and putting it in a sealed box then and there, I think you'll get a few more responses, and we can encourage our community groups that use the centres to encourage users to fill in that form. I've forgotten what page it was on now, but somewhere in here it's when the city may not engage. There's about when there's not enough time to engage. In my view, I think it's justified to not do the entire full engagement process if there's just no time to do it. But I would like to see the city maintain some kind of a generic avenue for anyone who wants to provide their feedback on anything at any point in time. It may mean that their response doesn't go into a particular report because it's past a cut-off. It may mean that they may not get a full response in time, but I don't ever want to have a resident want to provide feedback on something and be told no. So that feedback needs to be accepted even if it then doesn't get included in an official report. I note that we've scratched out where the community can request engagement, a community engagement process. I think the community should be able to still request a community engagement process, and that request could either come to council or be considered by the CEO, and then the CEO's decision is reported to council. And that's it from me, and thank you very much for the report.
Thank you, Councillor Seif. Did administration want to take those comments or respond to anything in particular? Yep, Director Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a really interesting comment about community requesting that engagement. I think here we have, for example, advisory groups. That's one of the wonderful mechanisms that we've got. We have this discussion with our members of community, those community champions, and that's where those issues arise or bubble up, and it often then turns into a project. Or out in operational everyday business, particularly through, say, the community development teams, and they're dealing with community members all the time. That is where that ordinary project planning and projects actually come to light. That's what we see as our role in that. So we'd probably need to go away and think about that one a little bit further. But what we're definitely hearing tonight is a strong collaboration between strategic communications, so for example letters, posters, the construction signage, as well as that engagement framework. So looking at advisory groups, citizens, juries, the tools, and so perhaps we go back within the team and have a discussion around this framework being potentially more future focused and being a strategic communications and engagement framework, and combining those two things together instead of its single current focus being in engagement. So just probably put that out there, and we can take that offline and discuss it before it comes back to you.
Thank you, Ms Davies. I'll go to Councillor Berry and then I'll go to the Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll refer to page 72 where we've got the inform, consult, involve, collaborate and empower. Maybe it would be a good idea, as Councillor Figg said, if we could have a very quick example of each of those after, not necessarily for us, but for the community to understand where there is times that we'll just tell you that we're doing this and other times where we're going to go to the other extreme and completely empower you. And my last point tonight would probably be, is it worth considering changing the What's Happening magazine? And I'll say this because we've got East Wanneroo coming on board. So it's centred to, maybe we do 3, one for the south wards, maybe one for the central and then one for the north. So they're more meaningful. So when we do communicate things like, we've just built this, it means something to the people in the south that it necessarily wouldn't mean to the north. I just think, and also of the updates of East Wanneroo coming for the central region, that might be quite useful. That I really haven't got much else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. I'll quickly go to the Mayor before we wrap up the workshop, unless anyone else has got anything burning.
Sorry about this, but I listened to your signage, and you know that little sign we saw out the arc? As soon as I saw that, I went straight to admin, and there were specific reasons why it was that sign, that size, and so it would be good if we could just be, I can't remember what it was, but if we could be informed. The other thing is we had issues with the signage that went up for the fishing platform, because that had to go up in a time frame for the minister, because it was government advised, and then the minister pushed out her visiting, and then that affected the community knowing in a timely fashion. Then we had issues with signage around Dordak Kepa, because we didn't have the state signage is big enough. The City of Wanneroo signage was too big on the wrap we had around it. Do you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is I'm great for big signage to tell everybody what we're doing, but let's be a little bit more better planned with what we're doing. And if it has to be a small sign, like it is at the Arc, because that was the first thing I said, and I agreed with you, I did get reasons back. I can't remember what it was, but there was some reason, and it was something to do with grant funding and sizing and all of this kind of stuff with the grant funding from the federal and the state and all of that. So sometimes our signage is not controlled by us; it's controlled by who's giving us the grant funding and that as well. But it'd really be good if we could maximise it so the community could see what we're doing. I just wanted to bring up those 3 different situations that cause different issues because of who we're working with and who we're fortunate enough to get funds to help us build those buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Berry, quick point.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to go back to the signage. And I will refer back to the fishing platform signage. The signage 3 years ago, as you drove into Fred Stubbs car park for community engagement, was a small sign on the left by the bins, not very visible. The sign that then went up for the minister's visit, as the mayor's just alluded to, you couldn't get in that car park without seeing the sign. So I do think if we're going to take the community on the journey, we do give them a respect of, here's the sign to say you can have your engagement, and now here's the sign to say it's coming, and put them in the same place, not, that did antagonise. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Rowe.
I just wanted to come in on this signage debate. I'm very much looking forward to it because Councillor Seif and I are very, very close to finally having a sign in our area, because there actually is a capital project that's going to meet the threshold very soon.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. And thank you, councillors and staff as well, for contributing to the workshop tonight. I think it's been a really good opportunity, and I think all the councillors and staff have raised some really amazing points where I think we've got some genuine opportunities to work with. So I look forward to seeing the outcomes from that. So thank you for that. We will move on now. So there is no recommendation, so I will move a procedural motion to reinstate standing orders under item 5.85 for the remainder of the agenda items. Mayor is moving, and a seconder. Councillor Berry is seconding, so we'll go to the vote for that. That is carried unanimously. So item 8, date of the next meeting. The next Policy Review Committee meeting is scheduled for 6 p.m. Monday the 31st of August 2026. And item 9, closure. There is no further business. I now declare that the Policy Review Committee meeting close at 8:39 p.m. Thank you, councillors and staff, for your patience this evening.